The shadow of Christmas. It was Christmas Eve in the small town of Juniper, where snow blanketed the streets and the scent of pine filled the air. Families were gathered around their trees, adorned with twinkling lights and ornaments, while carols echoed through the frosty air. But in the outskirts, where the shadows grew long and the moonlight barely penetrated, a different kind of magic lingered. The old Whitaker house had been abandoned for years, its windows dark and its paint peeling. The townsfolk spoke in hushed tones about the last family that lived there, the Whitakers, who vanished one Christmas night without a trace. Some said they were taken by the spirit of Christmas. Others whispered of darker things that lurked in the woods surrounding the house. Curiosity got the better of a group of teenagers, Mark, Scarlett, Lucy, and Ricky. Fueled by holiday spirit and the thrill of adventure, they dared each other to explore the Whitaker house. As the clock struck midnight, they made their way through the snow, flashlights in hand, laughter masking their growing unease. The door creaked open, revealing a dust-laden living room frozen in time. The Christmas tree, though dry and brittle, still stood in the corner, adorned with faded ornaments and a tattered star atop. It was as if the house had been waiting for them. "Let's take a selfie," Scarlett suggested, holding up her phone. They huddled around the tree, their faces illuminated by the cold white light of the screen. Just as they posed, a chilling wind swept through the room, extinguishing their flashlights. The laughter died, replaced by an eerie silence. "Did you feel that?" Ricky whispered, his voice trembling. Before anyone could respond, a low, mournful sound echoed from the attic, a haunting melody that resembled a Christmas carol. It was unlike any they had heard. It was filled with sorrow and despair. Against their better judgment, the group decided to investigate. As they climbed the creaking staircase, the air grew colder, and the sweet scent of pine was replaced by something rotten and stale. The attic door was ajar, and the carol grew louder, drawing them closer. Inside, they found an old, dusty music box sitting in the center of the floor. It played the melancholic tune, but no one was near to wind it. As they stepped closer, shadows flickered around them, twisting and writhing like smoke. Suddenly, the shadows coalesced into a shape, a figure draped in tattered red cloth, its face obscured by a dark hood. It raised a skeletal hand, pointing directly at them. "You shouldn't have come," it rasped, its voice a chilling whisper that echoed in their bones. Panic surged through the group. They turned to flee, but the attic door slammed shut, trapping them inside. The figure took a step forward, and the room grew colder still. "The spirit of Christmas seeks company," it hissed, "and you have come to keep it warm." Mark, desperate, grabbed a nearby old ornament and hurled it at the figure. It shattered, and the room erupted into chaos. The shadows swirled violently, and a cacophony of anguished cries filled the air. "No!" Lucy screamed, tears streaming down her face. "We didn't mean to disturb you." With a final piercing wail, the figure lunged at them, and the world went black. The next morning, the townsfolk awoke to a fresh layer of snow, crisp and untouched. Families gathered to celebrate. But as they passed the Whitaker house, they noticed something strange. In the window, 4 figures were silhouetted against the light of the rising sun, their faces frozen in expressions of terror, forever trapped in the shadow of Christmas. The music box continued to play its haunting melody, a reminder of the night the spirit of Christmas claimed new souls, and Juniper would never forget the price of curiosity. As the days turned into weeks, the townsfolk of Juniper went about their holiday traditions, blissfully unaware of the fate that had befallen the 4 teenagers. Christmas passed, and with it, the snow began to melt. But the Whitaker house remained, a dark specter on the town's outskirts, a place avoided and whispered about. However, one cold January evening, a group of children ventured close to the house. Drawn by the thrill of a dare, they gathered on the edge of the property, peering through the frost-covered windows, their breath visible in the frigid air. "Do you think those kids are still in there?" one boy named Danny asked, shivering slightly.
"Stop it!"
"That's just a story," his friend Lucy insisted, though her voice faltered. The tales of the shadow of Christmas had spread among the younger children, turning into a chilling folklore. But as the last rays of sunlight faded, casting long shadows across the yard, an unnatural silence enveloped the area. Suddenly, the distant sound of a familiar carol floated through the air, chilling them to the bone. It was the same haunting tune that had lured the teenagers to their doom. "Let's go!" Danny urged, his curiosity piqued despite the fear gnawing at him. The group hesitated, but emboldened by youthful bravado, They took a few tentative steps toward the door, which stood slightly ajar, as if inviting them in. Inside the house, the atmosphere was thick with the scent of decay and pine. The living room was just as they had imagined from the stories, dusty and still, with the Christmas tree standing sentinel in the corner. The air felt heavy and goosebumps raced across their skin. "Guys, this isn't fun anymore," Lucy said, her voice trembling. But before anyone could respond, the music box in the attic began to play, its sorrowful tune echoing through the corridors. "Let's check it out," Danny urged, his excitement overshadowing the sense of dread that hung in the air. They climbed the creaking stairs, each step echoing like a heartbeat in the silence. As they reached the attic door, it swung open on its own, revealing the dimly lit room. The music box sat in the center, untouched, its lid open as if waiting for them. Shadows danced along the walls, flickering like candlelight. "Do you hear that?" One of the girls whispered, her eyes wide. The mournful melody wrapped around them, pulling them closer to the box. Suddenly a chill swept through the attic, and the shadows coiled tighter, forming the shape of the figure they had heard about, the spirit of Christmas. Its skeletal hand stretched out toward them, and they felt an overwhelming sense of despair wash over them. "Join us," it whispered, its voice a blend of sorrow and hunger. "You have come to keep me warm." Panic surged through the children, and they turned to flee, but the door slammed shut, trapping them just as it had the teenagers before. "Let us go!" Danny shouted, his voice cracking. The figure began to glide toward them, its face still hidden beneath the tattered hood. "You are curious, just as they were. You will learn the true meaning of Christmas," it rasped, its voice echoing with the cries of the lost. In that moment of pure terror, Lucy spotted an old ornament hanging from a dusty branch of the tree. "The ornament!" she shouted, scrambling toward it. "We have to break it!" Danny and the others followed her lead, and they quickly grabbed the ornament, its glass glimmering in the dim light. With a collective cry, they hurled it at the figure, and the room erupted into chaos. The shadows screamed, a dissonance of voices rising in an anguished wail. "No, you cannot escape." The figure lunged, but just as it reached them, the ornament shattered against the floor, sending shards of glass flying. In an instant, the shadows recoiled, and the figure dissipated into a cloud of darkness, leaving only the echo of its mournful tune. The attic door burst open, and the children bolted down the stairs, racing out of the house and into the cold night. They ran until they reached the safety of the town, panting and terrified. As they looked back, the Whitaker house loomed ominously, but the music had stopped, and the shadows seemed to retreat. From that day on, the story of the shadow of Christmas became a cautionary tale among the children of Juniper. The Whitaker house remained abandoned, a chilling reminder of the price of curiosity, and the music box never played again. But every Christmas Eve, as the snow fell softly and the townsfolk celebrated, whispers would circulate about the Whitaker house. Some claimed to see flickering lights in the windows, while others insisted they heard faint carols in the night. The local children spoke in hushed tones about the shadow that lurked within, warning each other never to venture too close. Years passed, and the story became a relic of the past, fading with each generation. The children who had escaped the attic grew up, moved away, and eventually, the fear surrounding the Whitaker house dwindled. Yet one curious boy named Lucas, who had recently moved to Juniper, stumbled upon the old legends while exploring the town. Intrigued by the tale of the shadow of Christmas, Lucas felt a pull toward the house. He had always been fascinated by the supernatural, and the idea of an abandoned mansion filled with secrets was irresistible. As Christmas approached, he gathered a few friends, Evie, Jack, and Mia, and shared his plans. "Let's go check it out," he urged, excitement dancing in his eyes. "We can prove that it's just a story." Despite their initial hesitations, Lucas's enthusiasm was contagious. With flashlights and a sense of adventure, they made their way to the Whitaker house on Christmas Eve. Just like the teenagers had before them, the air was thick with anticipation as they approached the door, its paint peeling and wood warped. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" Evie asked, glancing back at the town lights twinkling in the distance. "Of course. It's just an old house. Nothing's going to happen," Lucas replied, pushing the door open with a creak that echoed through the stillness. Inside, the atmosphere was eerie yet captivating. The living room was dimly lit by the moonlight, filtering through the grimy windows. The Christmas tree stood as a testament to time, its branches drooping under the weight of dust and faded ornaments. As they ventured further into the house, the haunting melody began to play softly from the attic, sending shivers down their spines. "What is that?" Mia whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's the music box," Lucas said, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "We have to check it out." They climbed the staircase, the steps creaking under their weight. The air grew colder, and an unsettling feeling settled in their chests. At the attic door, they hesitated, exchanging nervous glances before Lucas pushed it open. The scene was eerily familiar. The music box sat in the center of the room, its lid open, the haunting carol filling the air. Shadows flickered against the walls, and for a moment it felt as if the room was alive, swirling with a dark energy. "Do you think it's true?" Jack asked, his voice trembling. "Do you think the spirit is really here?" Just then the shadows coalesced, forming the outline of the figure draped in tattered red. Its hollow gaze fell upon them, and a chilling wind swept through the attic. "You have come to join us," it whispered, its voice a ghostly echo. Panic surged, and the friends turned to flee, but the door slammed shut, trapping them inside. The figure advanced, its skeletal finger pointing toward them. "Curiosity has brought you here, and now you will learn the true meaning of Christmas." In a desperate attempt to escape, Lucas remembered the stories of the shattered ornament. "We need to break something," he yelled, scanning the room for anything they could use. With trembling hands, he grabbed a dusty glass ornament hanging from the tree. "On three," he shouted to his friends, who nodded in agreement. "1, 2, 3. They hurled the ornament at the figure, but instead of shattering, it hung in the air for a moment before falling to the floor, rolling to a stop at the figure's feet. The spirit paused, its expression unreadable. In that brief moment, the attic filled with the anguished cries of the lost souls, trapped within the figure. The shadows writhed violently, and the music grew louder, drowning out their screams. "You cannot escape," it howled as the room began to spin around them. But Lucas, fueled by determination, snatched another ornament and threw it at the figure again. This time it shattered into 1,000 pieces, and a blinding light filled the room. The figure recoiled, its form dissipating into the swirling shadows, which howled in agony as the light enveloped them. The friends felt a rush of air, and suddenly they were outside the house, stumbling into the snow. Gasping for breath, they looked back as the Whitaker house stood silent, its windows dark and foreboding. The snow fell gently around them, blanketing the ground and muffling the echoes of their frantic hearts. Did we really escape?" Evie gasped, her voice trembling as she stared at Lucas, who was still holding the remnants of the shattered ornament. Lucas nodded, his face pale but resolute. "We did, but we need to tell everyone what happened." As they hurried back to the safety of the town, they recounted their harrowing experience, warning others of the dangers that lurked within the Whitaker house. The story spread quickly, reigniting the fear that had once surrounded the old mansion. Families warned their children, and the town held an emergency meeting to discuss the house's ominous presence. "We cannot let this continue," the mayor declared, his voice firm. "We need to take action to ensure no one else is drawn into its darkness." The townsfolk decided to band together and seal the Whitaker house, boarding up the windows and locking the doors. They placed a large sign at the entrance that read, "Danger, do not enter." However, some curious souls were undeterred. They spoke of the lost souls trapped within, yearning for freedom. The legend of the Shadow of Christmas grew, now, entwined with the stories of Lucas and his friends, who had faced the dark spirit and survived. Christmas came again, and with it, a heavy blanket of snow. The town held its annual festivities, but the air was tinged with anxiety. The Whitaker house loomed in the distance, a reminder of the darkness that could rise from curiosity. On Christmas Eve, Lucas and his friends gathered together, reminiscing about their ordeal. They had formed a bond that would last a lifetime, but the weight of what they had experienced hung heavily on their minds. "Do you think the spirit is really gone?" Mia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," Lucas replied, staring out the window at the house. "But I think we disturbed something that night. We can't let our guard down." As the clock struck midnight, a cold breeze swept through the town, sending shivers down their spines. The distant sound of a carol floated through the air, a familiar and mournful tune that made their hearts race. "Not again," Jack murmured, glancing nervously at his friends. Suddenly, a loud thud echoed from the direction of the Whitaker house. The friends exchanged worried glances, and without thinking, they grabbed their flashlights and stepped outside. The snow crunched beneath their feet as they approached the house, the air thick with tension. Flickering lights danced in the windows, illuminating the darkened corners of the yard. "Should we go in?" Evie asked, her voice shaking. "We have to see if it's really happening again," Lucas said, his determination igniting. They stepped through the threshold, the door creaking ominously as it opened. Inside, the atmosphere felt charged, the air thick with the scent of pine mixed with something foul. The Christmas tree stood in the corner, but this time, it was adorned with new ornaments, glimmering and fresh, as if someone had decorated it just moments before. The music box began to play, its melody intertwining with the sound of their racing hearts. They climbed the staircase once more, the familiar sense of dread creeping in. When they reached the attic, they found the music box sitting there, its lid closed. The shadows danced along the walls, and then they coalesced into the figure, a ghastly silhouette, draped in its tattered red cloak. "Welcome back," it whispered, its voice a haunting echo. "You have returned to keep me company once more." Fear gripped them, but Lucas stepped forward, defiance shining in his eyes. "We won't be part of your collection. You can't have us." As the figure advanced, the room filled with a blinding light. The friends remembered the shattered ornament, and working together, they grabbed a nearby ornament from the tree. This one, however, was not glass but a shimmering bauble that pulsed with energy. "On three," Lucas shouted once more. "1, 2, 3. They hurled the ornament at the figure, and as it struck, the room erupted in a brilliant flash. The shadows screamed, swirling around them as the figure writhed in agony. "No, you cannot escape me," it howled, its voice filled with rage and despair. But the energy from the ornament surged, filling the attic with warmth and light. The figure began to dissolve, the shadows that had once held it together unraveling, like threads pulled from a frayed tapestry. The anguished cries of the lost souls echoed in the air, mingling with the melodic sound of the music box that had now transformed into a symphony of hope. "Keep going! We can free them," Lucas shouted, rallying his friends. They grabbed every ornament they could find, each one glowing with an ethereal light. As they hurled them at the figure, the room became a whirlwind of color and sound, each ornament bursting into a shower of sparkles upon impact. One by one, the shadows shrank away, revealing flickering images of the souls trapped within. They were not just shadows, but faint outlines of people, children, families, and friends, each one reflecting joy and sorrow. With every ornament shattered, the souls began to break free, their expressions shifting from despair to gratitude. Finally, with one last ornament left in hand, Lucas took a deep breath. "This is it! For everyone!" he yelled, throwing it with all his strength. As it struck the figure, a blinding light enveloped the attic, and for a moment time seemed to stand still. The figure let out a final, heart-wrenching wail as it disappeared entirely, the last remnants of darkness dissipating into the air like smoke. The attic fell silent, the music box now still, and the once oppressive atmosphere transformed into one of peace and tranquility. As the light faded, Lucas and his friends found themselves surrounded by the freed souls, who looked at them with expressions of profound gratitude. "Thank you." One of them, a woman with a gentle smile, spoke softly. "You have given us the gift of freedom." With a wave of their hands, the spirits began to ascend, their forms glowing brighter as they drifted toward the ceiling, eventually vanishing in a cascade of shimmering light. The attic was now filled with a warm glow, and the weight of darkness that had suffocated the Whitaker house for so long was lifted. "We did it," Mia breathed, her eyes wide with disbelief. "We really did it." Lucas nodded, still reeling from the experience. "We freed them. They can finally rest." As they made their way back down the stairs, they felt a lightness in their hearts. The sense of dread that had once clouded the house was gone, replaced by a feeling of hope and renewal. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the town in a soft, serene hush. Word of their encounter spread quickly throughout Juniper, transforming the Whitaker house from a place of fear into a symbol of courage and redemption. The townsfolk embraced the story of Lucas and his friends, celebrating their bravery every Christmas, honoring the souls that had been freed. On Christmas Eve each year, the town would gather at the base of the Whitaker house, lighting candles in remembrance of the spirits and the adventure that had brought them peace. They sang carols, their voices rising into the night, blending with the gentle sound of falling snow. As the years passed, Lucas, Evie, Jack, and Mia became legends in their own right, their bond strengthened by the experience they had shared. They often returned to the Whitaker house, now a beloved part of their town's history, to reflect on their journey and the lessons learned. And every Christmas, as the snow fell softly, they would tell the story of the shadow of Christmas, a tale not of fear, but of friendship, courage, and the power of love to vanquish darkness. In the end, the house stood not as a shadow of despair, but a beacon of hope, reminding everyone that even the darkest of places could be transformed by a little light. And so, the legacy of the Whitaker house lived on, forever entwined with the spirit of Christmas and the hearts of those who dared to believe.